Support for higher education in focus comes from the Penn State Alumni Association, serving alumni and alma mater for 145 years. On the web at alumni.psu.edu. Penn State Bookstore, improving the student experience at Penn State with philanthropic support of student causes throughout the university. On the Hub Lawn or at psu.bncollege.com. The attorneys of McNeese, Wallace, and Nurek. Your mission, your goal, your lawyers. More at mwn.com. And from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Higher Education in Focus. I'm Patty Satalia with my co-host, Penn State President Dr. Eric Barron. Penn State wants to encourage students to think more like entrepreneurs. A new $30 million initiative called Invent Penn State is aimed at getting promising new ideas and technologies out of university labs and into the marketplace. The end game is bolstering the state's economy by creating new jobs with an eye on promoting student career success. In the first part of a three-part series, we'll talk with a Penn State alumnus and successful entrepreneur whose uncommon devotion to Penn State Altoona is helping to provide students with the knowledge and skill sets they need to succeed. Joining us in the studio is Steve Sheetz, chairman of the Sheetz Family Council. He and his wife Nancy established the Sheetz Fellows Program and the Sheetz Center for Entrepreneurial Excellence, both based in Altoona. Also joining us is Loretta Zeth, a student at Penn State Altoona, working on a bachelor's degree in business with a concentration in management and marketing and a minor in entrepreneurship. She's also president of the Sheetz Fellows Program, which provides mentoring opportunities and resources for students in the business program. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
I'm going to begin with you, Dr. Barron. $30 million invested in economic development and student career success. What exactly is this Invent Penn State?
Well, the idea here is that everybody talks about Penn State having this tremendous economic impact. But what we'd really like to be known for is for driving the economy and creating jobs. So this is a matter of getting all that intellectual property. We have all those different ideas that stem from an $800 million research machine and working to get those ideas more into the marketplace. And then to have our students that are educated on the cutting edge to follow that intellectual property right into the marketplace into good jobs. So
it's not enough to be the biggest contributor to Pennsylvania's economy at something like almost $17 billion a year. We can do more. Penn State can do more.
We can do more. You know, you get economic impact by looking at how many employees you have and then having some multiplier to that and looking at how much money you bring in. But what we'd like to look at is how many companies we license, how many startups that we have, to what degree are we attracting businesses to the state of Pennsylvania because of all this intellectual capital that's sitting here. And so this means we have to work a little bit more deeply in terms of incentivizing faculty and students, in terms of creating visibility for what's going on, in terms of building an entrepreneurial ecosystem around all of our campuses, and in terms of the deliberate things that we do for our students to help them be successful in the marketplace.
And we're not talking just about business students at Penn State. You're talking about entrepreneurship, whether you're in the arts and humanities, whether you're working in energy, any place you're working at Penn State, there's an opportunity to be an entrepreneur.
There is, not just to be an entrepreneur, but to advantage students who go off in different careers. You know, you can take the simple idea of an engineering major who goes and works for a big company. Will that student be advantaged by having some business sense? All the companies say yes. Or think about that musician that's going to go out into the marketplace, and they may be extremely gifted, but if they can't market themselves today, then that gift will be something they do for fun, not for something they do for income. And so I can't think of any student not advantaged if they're so inclined.
Well, speaking of advantage students, what you're doing with Sheetz Inc. is remarkable. The Sheetz Fellowship, the Sheetz Center for Entrepreneurial Excellence. Before we find out exactly what they are, What's the motivation behind this tremendous support for Penn State students?
Well, you know, I really think our chancellor, Lori Beck-DeWary, had a lot to do with it. She got a lot of energy, and she started to develop downtown Altoona, and we really saw a chance to combine, I think, three of the things closest to me, which was Altoona. The people of Altoona really helped build our business. You know, that's where we started, and that's where the initial stores were and our support came from. So help Altoona. Penn State, near and dear to my heart.
You're a graduate of Penn State
Graduate
with a degree
of Penn
in
State.
business?
2 years in Altoona and 2 years at University Park. And then finally, the last was the students, to really help the students. And I saw a way to kind of help all three. And the last, of course, with the students, we just really saw an opportunity to help bring them into the community, bring the community to them. And the objective was really better prepare them, not just to start a business, because not all of them will be able to do that, but to be better prepared to enter the world, whether it's business or not, just to go out into that.
And the idea
world.
is that entrepreneurial skills are life skills. Are you finding that to be the case as a Sheetz Fellow? Loretta, tell us a little bit about what this experience has been. You're a senior majoring in business.
It has been an eye-opener for sure of the different paths in business, and not only just starting your own company or business, but the different paths within a company, management, marketing, all those.
And you know, Steve, I particularly enjoy your story because you went to Penn State, you became an entrepreneur, you created a wonderful, successful business, and now you're giving back to make it easier for other folks to follow. How do you see the fellows as creating that path into the marketplace, and how do the students intersect with the Entrepreneurial Center that you've built in Altoona?
Well, you know, a lot of it has to do with an entrepreneur in residence program. We bring the entrepreneurs in to visit the students, and it's amazing how they end up connecting with the students and the students with them, which leads to some mentoring as well. And then bringing the entrepreneurs in for other sessions, so it's not just an entrepreneurial center for students. We're trying to help the entrepreneurs in the community and trying to help them grow as well to make it a true community entrepreneurial center, as well as obviously for the students.
You said that that books are the key to academic success, but experience unlocks the door, and I think that's what you're probably finding out, Loretta.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that, and we try to bring those entrepreneurs in to kind of supplement what they're learning, and I think it really has worked well. Plus, send them out in the community for community service. Not just teaches them to give back, but it puts them in touch with the members of the community and realize, you know, that you are a part of a community wherever you're going to be.
And so, Loretta, what type of service project are you in the midst of?
We have a lot going on at one time. So one weekend you could be volunteering at Salvation Army, the next you could be at Blair Senior Services, or during the week we could be at elementary schools. Right now we're involved at a library at one of the local elementary schools in Altoona. It helps us realize that we do servant leadership because you need to serve before you can lead. So that.
Well, I think there's a distinct advantage too, that when you present your resume, I think it makes a difference to an employer that you've been doing service, because you're signaling how you might treat a customer or how you might treat a fellow employee, as well as having this thought that it's not just all about you.
You know, Dr. Barron, we know that if students attend college or university in Pennsylvania, they'll more likely enjoy a career in Pennsylvania. Is the same true if they have the kind of experience, in other words, if the entrepreneurial experience in Pennsylvania, that if they innovate in Pennsylvania, that innovation will stay in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, you know, I think it might. It's interesting. In a different state, someone said to me, I don't want to count any university's success if that success went out of the state and didn't benefit the Commonwealth, especially a state, especially if the state helped fund part of that education. But you know, I sit there and say, wow, if I'm sitting here and my son becomes a CEO of a major international company and that happens to be headquartered in Chicago or Minneapolis, I'm going to be pretty darn proud, and I think the parent is going to be as well. And so, truthfully, wherever that intellectual property goes, wherever that company starts, I'm going to be proud. But if we've disadvantaged students and they go out the door and say, the only place I can start is Silicon Valley, or I have to go to Austin, Texas, then I think we've done something wrong. And so this is part of the reason why I think you need this entrepreneurial ecosystem. I think it's also one reason why I love what Steve is doing in Altoona, because he's signaling the opportunity for students to become a part of a community and understand that entrepreneurial space. And then I think he's advantaging Altoona and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, because people will come out the door and say, this is a good place for me to build my company.
I think there's some people saying, you know, entrepreneurs, they don't even need a college education. We've got Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. They dropped out of college before they attained this amazing success. And yet when you look at employees, and even when Bill Gates, when they go to hire, they still look for college graduates, which I find very interesting. So I wonder what you look for when you hire for Sheetz, which now is 500 stores strong and 17,000 employees.
It is fascinating because many entrepreneurs, obviously, as you say, dropped out of college. But as we look now, we're looking for college graduates in many regards, because there's a lot of specialization. You look at us as convenience stores. I still think we've got 6 attorneys that are there, and you know, from different spaces. We've got all kind of CAD operators and engineers and civil engineers. We've got, you know, so many different people. But we are looking for college graduates because we think it gives you an edge, and we want you to be engaged really in lifelong learning. It doesn't mean you won't be successful without that college degree, and there'll still be many entrepreneurs that come through. But in the end, when you get specialized like engineering and law and different spaces, marketing even, we're looking for that education.
I think the chances go down too. You can name someone who's been extremely successful, but I think the chances go way down.
Yeah.
How has this experience with the Sheetz Fellow, as the president of the Sheetz Fellow, influenced your own career aspirations? Have you figured out what you want to do, and do you want to do it in Pennsylvania?
I definitely do want to stay in Pennsylvania, specifically Altoona. It's just, you have that atmosphere that it's inviting and exciting, and it's opened my eyes to a lot of different opportunities. Whereas before, I thought I was going to stick to one straight path and that was what I was going to do. But now, this opportunity has opened my eyes to many different paths. So now it's at the point where I have to decide which path am I going to take.
It's always good to have opportunities and different paths to take.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we actually bring in social entrepreneurs into the program. As you say, they're not just business. I mean, we've got some entrepreneurs who have causes that are really strong, from Sister Paula, who is all about feeding people, to another woman who started a daycare facility. I mean, it's not, there's entrepreneurs in all fields, and certainly not just business. And we try to bring them in to the students as well.
And how would you connect entrepreneurs, and even the whole notion of bringing in a social entrepreneur into a company? How do you connect that with just the whole idea of innovation and making sure that a company has a long-term future and isn't just a pet rock that goes up and down? That probably dated me, didn't it?
Well, the innovation that we saw in these social, you know, it really comes back to me with a passion. People have to have a passion. You know, like Sister Paula, who has that passion to just help people, and another woman who, because of her son, had a passion to develop a certain kind of a playground for people with disabilities. I mean, I want to get those students to feel that passion. That's that exists really in entrepreneurs, whether they're social or business. All of those people will have a passion to make changes, and they will see it through. And they will have that determination and discipline to get it done.
How important, when you make a hiring decision, is this positive attitude and this willingness to take risks. And I say that because, you know, for an outside observer, it may look like for Sheetz it was smooth sailing from, you know, the 1960s to the present, you know, from one store, a dairy store, to what you have today. But there were some serious bumps in the road.
Oh. You have to have lots of bumps. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, you kind of expect it. But it's back to that passion. And, you know, people say, well, you know, you had obstacles in the way. But you, as an entrepreneur, you always say, we're going to overcome whatever's thrown in our path. We're going to get through it. There were days, 1972, we went from 7 to 14 stores, didn't have any money, except for the suppliers' money. So we were borrowing from them. And then in the late 80s, it got real bad. And in the late 80s, we ended up having to bet the whole company, which is not a situation that I want to be in again. But you come to a place where you've really, you know, you've got the wrong model. You haven't listened to customers. You haven't listened to your employees.
And so it's this willingness to change.
Well, it's a revolution because, you know, you've hit a spot where you can't be. You cannot exist. You're going to go, you've watched it go downhill, and it's going straight down. Unless you go back and take the risk and say, it wasn't even a risk to me. We've got to go in a different direction. And in that different direction meant we developed one new store, and we had 150 that did not fit the model.
It didn't look anything like the new one.
No, but this one we know is where we want to be. Now I got to figure out how to get the 150 to here, and that's what you've got to do.
But so now you've had a description about taking a risk and about working with a sense of passion and listening so that you're not deaf to all the changes. Does this make it hard to teach someone to be an entrepreneur? Do you have to live it, or do you think we can actually deliver a curriculum that helps students be successful?
Well, it's interesting because when we talked about the Entrepreneurial Center, I said, I'm not even sure we can teach entrepreneurialism. But I do know that if you create a culture of entrepreneurialism and you get entrepreneurs around the students, you will have it rub off. I mean, in our own family, I was exposed to entrepreneurs, and I know that it helped me become an entrepreneur without question. And so I have that same sense by getting them, each a mentor, each of the students, an entrepreneurial mentor, and having entrepreneurs come in residence, speaking to them. I just feel like they can really bring out, if you have that passion and entrepreneurial spirit, and they can help you. I tell the students, do not ever be afraid to ask for help. I mean, that's the biggest thing Bob and I did, was ask people.
And you said you were never turned down.
They never
Didn't matter who you asked, a competitor,
Doesn't matter.
The banker,
I'm telling you,
other professionals.
They open up to you. They feel honored that you would approach them and have that respect for them.
What most significantly, Loretta, have you learned? If there were one takeaway thing from the experience as a Sheetz Fellow, what would it be?
I've learned that you can do anything you really want, and if you, like you said, if you just ask, you will find the help to complete the goal that you have for yourself. Or if you want to go and take that leap and start a business, you can do it. You have the support and the support of Penn State, really, to be entrepreneurial and to start your own business and take that leap.
And you're not quite sure yet whether you may start your own business or not.
Not quite sure, but it's a possibility to start a coffee shop someday, just you know, downtown.
And describe your interaction with your mentor.
Well, Mr. Sheetz is my mentor.
Oh, he is. Oh,
yes.
Man, you hit the jackpot.
I
then,
did.
right?
I did. I really did. I did. And he has opened my experience to different opportunities, and I got to sit in on executive board meetings and things that you really wouldn't get as a student, and those opportunities are wonderful.
Surely.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. Thanks to Steve Sheetz, chairman of the Sheetz Family Council, and Loretta Zeth, Penn State Altoona business student. We'll be back in just a moment to talk one-on-one with President Barron about Invent Penn State and how Penn State's success is tied to Pennsylvania's success. We'll be right back. I'm back with Penn State President Dr. Eric Barron. You know, Penn State is already one of the top 20 universities in the country in terms of attracting R&D investment. $800+ million per year. And yet Penn State ranks something like 70th in terms of taking the ideas and the processes that are developed at Penn State and making their way to the marketplace. Why isn't Penn State doing a better job of getting those ideas?
You know, I think part of it is attitude, in the sense that we've always thought there was an obligation to teach, and we felt that there was an obligation to publish. Knowledge held too closely is not knowledge. It's not passed on to anyone. And, you know, we've deliberately focused on that research and teaching mission. And now I think we have a chance to deliberately focus on the notion that getting an idea out into the marketplace is another way of transferring the knowledge from this institution. So I don't think we've really set our mind to it yet.
You know, it strikes me as this shared destiny. Penn State's success is Pennsylvania's success, and vice versa.
True, true, absolutely. And I think that if you think about that $800 million a year gorilla, and it's been plus $800 million for 4 years in a row, and even with up and downs in the economy, here goes Penn State, that there's so many different opportunities where we will actually create jobs in the state of Pennsylvania if we work at this. And we'll create a pathway for students to build companies or to attract companies into our state. I think the opportunity for us to be a real partner with the Commonwealth in changing the economics of Pennsylvania, it's really strong.
Now, the vision you have, you've invested $30 million in this Invent Penn State. And in a lot of ways, some of what we're doing, what Penn State is doing in terms of entrepreneurship isn't new, but it's all now under one umbrella. But the idea then is to inject $5 million long-term each year. What are you anticipating in terms of what the state, you know, the private sector and the public sector might be able to infuse in this idea?
Yeah, so first of all, we want to put our own money right where our mouth is. So you can look at us hiring entrepreneurs and residents, to people who have been there and done that, and to connect with our faculty and students. Putting money on the table for our faculty and students to take an idea closer to the marketplace. Having awards that recognize faculty for what they contribute. Adding visibility by having an intellectual property fair where people can come see the ideas that we have. Adding the opportunity for angel investors to be able to invest in companies that are coming out. Creating an ecosystem of space where you can get advice that you need, and having inexpensive space that if you win one of our competitions, you can take your idea right into the space and be mentored to be successful. So we have all those different pieces, our investment, and we're hoping philanthropists will sit there and say, you know, I can do a part of that. I can name an entrepreneur in residence. I can provide a student experience. And we're hoping the state will look at it and say, you know, we want Penn State to get closer to our workforce needs and attract companies. Let us contribute to hiring faculty in areas that are critical to the Commonwealth. So this can be a team effort.
I'm sort of curious, and I think a lot of people listening right now will be curious. If an idea is developed at Penn State by a student or by faculty, whose patent is it? Okay,
so if you're one of our employees, then we have a claim on the intellectual property, and we have a partnership agreement that is set up ahead of time. For a student, the student owns the IP. They're not an employee. But I don't, and some people say, so you can't really focus on that student entrepreneurship. And my view is, no, this should be part of our obligation to help students, even if it's around the university, not in the university, beyond classroom, and instead promoting our alumni and friends to invest. I think the students will give back in the long term. Look at Steve Sheetz, perfect example.
And this is not, as we said earlier, just for business students. You want 4 basic business classes, regardless of what your major is. Why is that so important, this set of courses that everyone should take?
I think any student that is actually consciously realizing that they're going to be working for a company or starting a business is advantaged by having basic business classes and entrepreneurial experiences. And I don't think it's a, you know, you're a history major and you may not be a historian, but you've developed a lot of critical thinking skills and communication skills, and you may see yourself going off into business, and that would advantage them. You're a music major. You're gifted as a musician, but you're just going to do it for fun. If you can't market yourself and hang out a shingle.
Is there a concrete project that's happening at Penn State right now that you foresee moving from the laboratory floor to the marketplace?
I think there's a lot of them, and we should think broadly. So, for example, what's called adaptive manufacturing, 3D printing. The day will come down the road where you'll have one in your home. And if a drawer on a cabinet breaks, you'll just type in there and it'll print it out, and you'll never go off to a store. That's one example. Think of another example. We're #1 in the world campus. Educational entrepreneurship should have a home right here.
And we're going to hold that for another conversation. Thanks again to our guest, Steve Sheetz, chairman of the Sheetz Family Council, and Loretta Zeth, Penn State Altoona business student. We'll be back next month to continue our discussion on entrepreneurship. With Penn State President Dr. Eric Barron, I'm Patty Satalia. For all of us here at WPSU, thanks for joining us.
Support for higher education in focus comes from the Penn State Alumni Association, serving alumni and alma mater for 145 years. On the web at alumni.psu.edu. Penn State Bookstore, improving the student experience at Penn State with philanthropic support of student causes throughout the university. On the Hub Lawn or at psu.bncollege.com. The attorneys of McNeese, Wallace, and Nurek. Your mission, your goal, your lawyers. More at mwn.com. And from viewers like you. Thank you.